everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today on the meditation channel. Hi, welcome. And if you're new to the channel, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Okay. I thought I would start the camera, and I've been wanting to talk about this for quite some time because this is something that I feel a lot of people can relate to, a lot of people suffer from. And I would like to simply just share what I did to essentially heal myself, essentially to transform my mental health, my health in general, my life. And of course, when you take care of your mental health, everything else gets better. I mean, if you have ever been depressed or suffered from depression or from mental health issues, well, you know how that is, right? It's fun. So much fun. Oh my God. No, of course not. It's horrible. It's basically self-torture and torture. You're tortured by the outside world, and most of all, you're tortured in here. And life just becomes hell. It just becomes living hell. And for those of you who are suffering from depression or who are struggling with mental health or with anxiety, I hear you, I'm here for you, and I am here hopefully to give you some hope, to let you know that there are other things that you can do outside of seeking a therapist or a counselor, which of course I do encourage you to go and see a therapist and a counselor. Now, just on that topic very quickly, I know it can be very difficult to find the right therapist, and I know it can be very difficult especially when you're in the thick of it and you need somebody right there and then. And of course you look and they're too expensive, or you can't find them, or they won't see you for another 2 or 3 weeks. So essentially, I get it. I've been there, and it's a struggle, especially when it's just hard enough just to get out of bed, let alone to find someone to help you. So I just want you to know that this is the reason why I'm also doing this video, because if you cannot find someone, first and foremost, I'm going to tell you, just do not give up, because it's a matter of, unfortunately, time and perseverance. But I also want to give you some tools to basically help you to start the process on your own, because there are things that you can do on your own to help your mental health, to help your state of being. Okay, so just a little bit about my story, guys, just so you get a little bit of context. So I'm gonna put a link up here somewhere. I have done literally I've documented myself through my depression. I want to give you a little bit about my backstory, so hopefully it can give you some context as to what I was going through, and maybe you'll find some similarities, and essentially what I obviously did to help myself get out of it. So I have suffered from mental health issues from a very, very young age. Probably it started around the age of 10. I remember the first time I self-harmed. I was actually 10 years old. Just to give you an idea of how brutal it was, there was a couple of things that I did, and this is not just to shock you, but just to give you an idea of how bad it was for me. And so I basically stapled my fingers, and then I got a piece of metal and I burnt it, and I would sear my skin. And this is from a 10-year-old, which is pretty crazy. Obviously, then in my teenage years, I continued to suffer. My parents separated, which had a huge negative ripple effect, but there was also mental health issues within my family. So I guess this is something that can be triggered and got passed down. And long story short, from my teenage years up until my early 30s, I was really struggling. I had severe, crippling depression for most of my life. I just was miserable for the most part. I eventually developed a panic disorder when I was here in the US. I can't remember how many years ago. I'm not very good with time, but it was quite a few years ago. I'd say about 6-7 years ago. And that's when things finally changed for me. I had a complete nervous breakdown. I was completely not functioning. I could not literally get out of bed. My body had completely shut down. I stopped eating. It's almost like, the best way to describe it is like my spirit just checked out of my body, and I was watching myself live in slow motion for about 6 months. That's how long it took for me to recover. I was in bed and completely out, like not human, for 3 months. And luckily I moved back to Australia. I was able to get on a plane somehow. I was given medication for this just to get through this time. I had lost, of course, an incredible amount of weight. I was just gone. I was just not here. I was not myself. I had finally just completely and utterly, physically, mentally, spiritually, you name it, I had broken down. And I, at that point, kind of had an ego death, I guess the best way to describe it. I was so upset with where my life was at. I was broke. I had nothing to my name. I had not succeeded in any of my careers or any of my endeavors. I could not create a relationship to save myself. And I had addiction problems by that point. I also made a video about my smoking, how I quit smoking marijuana. But I was smoking tobacco, smoking marijuana. And I know for some people marijuana is a medicine, but for me, unfortunately, it turned into an abusive relationship. Me and her, we were abusing each other, I guess, at that point. So essentially, I was a complete mess. I just was not a human anymore. I was barely a shell of a human. I was incredibly reactive, emotional. I would wake up and I would cry. I just was just not well. I was just in every aspect of my life, like I said. So I already had been meditating for quite some time and started to do some healing work, but I hadn't really made it the priority that it needed to be until this mental breakdown, because obviously when you can't function, then it has to be priority at this point. And so I made a decision once I had hit rock bottom that I was essentially going to get back up. I said, well, if I can't have the life that I've been fighting for so much, then I'm just going to create a new one, because essentially I have nothing to lose at this point. I've lost everything. I had nothing. And that is one of the things that I want to start off with, guys. If you're already in a place where you feel like you have nothing, it's a huge opportunity. And I know it doesn't feel like it, but ask yourself, if you have nothing to lose, then why not just try something outside of the box, try anything at this point, because I feel like a lot of the times we don't do these things because we're really just concerned about our image or how people perceive us or how our family and friends would think about us. But when you're at that point where you're so miserable, my advice is just go after what makes you happy, figure out what that is, and who cares what anybody else thinks, because at this point you literally have nothing to lose. So I went back to Australia. I was healing. I saw a therapist. I was very lucky because Australia has free healthcare. And even in mental health, they gave me some support. I had some friends who were very helpful around that time. And for 6 months, I was basically trying to just get back to some kind of functioning level. And once I was semi-functioning, but still, still smoking, still, on the healing path, I decided to move back to LA and try again. I knew that was a big risk, because at that point I was still having random panic attacks. I would even have them in my sleep. Like I would literally wake up in my sleep having a panic attack. But I was like, hey, might as well try. So I moved back to the US, and essentially that was my healing journey. It was not easy. There were some issues that happened. There were some things that definitely did not work out in my favor, but I really committed to the healing path. And around this time is when I started documenting all of this that I was going through. Because deep down, I think I really knew that I was going to get to where I'm at now, which is I don't have any ounce of depression. And if I do get to a point where something bad happens and I get triggered, which does happen once in a while, I have tools now that I use every single day religiously that basically give me that anchor, that give me those roots into the ground, that foundation that it basically will never allow me to fall back into that old version of me ever again. So one of the things that I want you to think about is habits, okay? Habits are a big, big, big factor. So when you think about depression, when you think about anxiety, essentially it's a mental habit, okay? So you have been telling yourself over and over and over and over every single day, you may be aware of these thoughts or you may not be aware of these thoughts. You've been talking yourself down. You've been talking bad, mean words to yourself. You've been essentially creating a negative mind frame because you wouldn't have anxiety or depression if you were thinking positive or happy or empowering thoughts, obviously. So that is the number one thing that I think that you really have to be aware of. It's called mental health for a reason, because it comes from the mind. And so that was the first thing that I decided to tackle. Now, I had been using affirmations for quite some time already, but I started to really hone down on my self-worth, my self-esteem, and I made it a daily practice. So every single morning, I would write an A4 page of affirmations, and I had been doing it for a while, but now I was really focusing on my mental health and just making my affirmations about my mental health, because I needed to get better up here. I needed to start to like myself. I had to find self-empowerment. I had to basically start loving myself and building a new relationship with myself. So ask yourself, how do I talk to myself? Do I put myself down? Do I call myself a loser? Do I abuse essentially myself? And I knew obviously that had to change. So I started to basically change the way I think and really commit to that. So even if I caught myself saying something bad about myself, I would stop and reprogram that thought. I would even sometimes say it out loud. I would say affirmations out loud. The second thing is my self-image, right? So I would look at myself in the mirror, and of course, the first thing you do is just tear yourself down. So I decided to stop doing that. And one of the things that I used to do was I used to put a piece of paper so I could not see my body on my face. I could just see my eyes. And I would only ever say nice things to myself. And if I ever caught myself saying something negative, I would look for something positive. That's really important because you're essentially breaking that habit, which goes into the automatic subconscious mind, where you see yourself and you're automatically going to put yourself down. So it's important just to change, again, that relationship with yourself. The third thing that I started really honing in on was my meditations. Now, of course, I've created the meditation channel because that's me literally healing myself, and I've just been passing on everything that I have learned, the information, the downloads that I've been receiving. And the more I meditated, the more I built that skill, the more access to wisdom and information and healing that I received, because I was tapping into a different frequency by that point. I was no longer tapping into my ego, my fear mind. I was starting to open up the door to something else, to something much more powerful. So I made sure that I would meditate every day. And I always say to my clients, it's kind of like brushing your teeth, right? You can maybe get away with it for a day, but then day 2, day 3, day 4, your teeth start rotting. So the same thing is with me with meditation. It's just a practice that I have kept up. I continue to keep up, and now I obviously teach it. And it's just essential and crucial for my mental health. So affirmations, changing the way I talk to myself. And guys, it sounds easy, but it's really not. You have to understand that you've been doing this same thing over and over and over and over and over again for so long. It's going to take some time, and that requires the commitment, and that requires the faith. And I had this just commitment to figuring it out and trying, because I knew that the other option wasn't looking very good, which means I would not be here today. So those are just some of the things that I would really suggest for you to start with. These are things that you can do yourself. Another thing I would recommend is self-help books, hearing about other people's stories, and doing everything you can essentially to change the relationship with your mind, because that is the most powerful relationship you're really going to have. Even the relationships outside, they're absorbed through the mind. And, if this machine is toxic, it's going to have a ripple effect on the outside. And you can essentially manifest negative experiences as well. So the minute I decided to heal my mind, my God, my life changed. And it continues to change, and I'm continuing to evolve, and I'm continuing to working on it. And I've never stopped ever since. And I've seen miracles happen in my life because of this. And even some of my affirmations have literally manifested. And I just continue on this path until the day I die. I'm sure this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And this is something that I obviously teach other people now, because it truly has changed my life. And it gave me my power back, and it gave me my life back, my happiness. Okay, so as I said, guys, just take a minute now just to think about how you talk to yourself, and you're going to find that it's going to be very difficult to make that shift. The other thing that I would also recommend is try not to complain, because complaining essentially, again, you're giving your power away to other people, places, and things. So you want to own your own mind. You want to own your thoughts. You want to own your reactions, and just make it a daily commitment. This is something that has to become priority if you're suffering from mental health. You got to be very self-aware. You got to observe yourself and essentially become more and more aware of how you think, and essentially shift those thoughts into thoughts that you want to think. Now, a little tip with affirmations, by the way, you don't want to jump from extremes. So if you're really depressed and you hate yourself and your thoughts are, I hate myself, you don't want to start saying, I love myself, because obviously they're just so extreme that your brain's going to go, yeah, right. So you want to basically do baby steps with affirmations, and it could just be little things like, I can heal. I am learning how to heal. I am motivated and committed to my health. Just little things like that. And then eventually you can build up to saying, hopefully one day, I love myself. I appreciate myself. I like myself. Okay, guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you'd like me to do a video about anything else that you want me to talk about, again, leave a comment below. And if you're new to the channel, hi, again, welcome. And please subscribe, because I do a ton of meditations and I do readings and I do all sorts of wonderful things. And yeah, I think that's it for today, guys. Yeah. My final thoughts is I just want you to know that the journey to recovery, to healing, is amazing. It is hard. It is not easy, but it's worth it. It is so worth it. So don't give up. Keep trying. All right, guys. Have a magical day.